Okay. You know the talk is extra. I don't mean extra cost. I mean like, it's, you know, we're here to practice. So one of the first things we can notice when we practice, where you come into like what seems like a Buddhist center, is there's a lot of bowing. What's the bowing? What is bow? Bowing. In Jerusalem, it causes a big problem. All the bowing. People have a big problem with those things in Jerusalem. But they have a problem with everything. So, although tonight there were no protests, I was really happy. The roads were clear for the first time in a month. Something happened, I don't know what. So why do we bow? What's this bowing? And why am I even talking about it? Or bringing it up? Well, it seems like we're bowing to the Buddha, and sometimes, you know, there's bowing to the Buddha, the statue. That's what the people in Jerusalem don't like. And really, we have to understand what Buddha means. You know, there's 3 Buddha bodies. There's 3 bodies of the Buddha. They have different names. And there's like the historical Buddha. There's a sort of a Buddha mind and an awakened, you know, reality, and then there's a sort of a universal Buddha. These 3 different bodies, traditional bodies that the Buddha takes on. The historical Buddha is sort of just like the, you know, the most outer form of that. And that's kind of there to remind us as a form. I mean, did the Buddha look like that? No way, the Buddha didn't look like that. Who knows what the Buddha looked like? I don't know, some Indian guy? Who knows? Right? Not like that. So why bow to that? Because that is sort of an archetype for enlightenment, that's all. Sort of just an image, religious art for enlightenment, which brings us to the second sort of Buddha body, which is the Buddha mind that we are getting closer to understanding in the bow. So when we bow to like the historical Buddha, which is impossible because he's not alive, first of all, and you know the body is not like that, so we're not bowing to the historical Buddha. So forget that. But then what we're bowing to something, what, this Buddha mind? Well, yeah, that's part of it, is we're understanding what the Buddha was trying to point out was the enlightened nature of every sentient being, of every human being. And so, yes, in a sense, we are acknowledging that, what we're bowing to, and giving honor to even somebody who, like, their outer self seems like, you know, far from Buddha, but we're bowing, we're acknowledging the true depth of who and what you are. Right? That's what the bow is. And it's a mutual recognition, you know, of that. And it's really quite wonderful then to bow, because you see that it's not really something you need to actually believe in. It's something you do. You manifest it in your body. You do it as a sort of, it doesn't matter what your mind is going through. And it's very much a continuation of our meditation. Because in meditation, I try to remind you, it really doesn't matter what's going on in your head. It really doesn't matter. Your thoughts are not the way to judge your meditation. If you were to judge your meditation by your thoughts, probably none of us would be here. Except Roy. His thoughts are like... I wouldn't...
You still don't read my mind, probably.
Yeah, well... That's true. But just because I don't want to. Because I'd feel so ashamed of my own mind. So what we're doing, though, is we are manifesting the same way. In the bow, it's a sense of, you know, It really doesn't matter what you're thinking, but the fact that you are, that's Buddha. Your existence is enlightened, and that's what I'm, and in the bow I'm encouraging myself and you together as a Sangha to realize that. That's what the bow is, You may not believe it, I'm gonna reassure you, okay? That's what the bow is. And I'm going to reassure myself by doing it. Doesn't matter what I think. You should bow to your enemies. All right? That's like a really important practice. You see an enemy in the media, bow to them. They're your teachers of the reality of Buddha. Because it's where you feel the most resistance, that's what you need to bow to. Not to gloss over the outer wrongs. That's, we're not ignoring outer reality. But we're wanting to acknowledge that there's more than just the outer reality. There's more than what the eye sees. Okay? There's a reality, a depth of Buddha. And that leads us to the third Buddha body, which is the universal Buddha body, where the Buddha's actual body manifests as sort of the sparkling universe. Right? What does that mean? Nobody knows. But it's the universal Buddha body. The sort of Dharmakaya, this huge, Buddha body, universal Buddha. Which means that existence itself is enlightened. And it's pretty interesting because in some of the Zen sources, especially what Dogen was writing, he starts to talk about mountains and rivers and trees and rocks and stones and grass being enlightened, right? He goes beyond sentience, goes beyond like consciousness, and starts to go even to stuff that is like non-conscious, not unconscious, just like nothing there, a rock. So, and when we start to actually open our hearts to what it means to be alive and what non-duality means in terms of non-separation and the great unity of existence, right? And that, some of the mineral, existence in rocks and stones is actually in my blood, and I have iron and I have minerals and magnesium and all the minerals and everything. So there's this sort of, just a molecular level and physical level, there's non-duality happening there. There's a sense of unity. So we kind of bow to that as well, and that's a little bit what Dogen was suggesting, is that sense of unity. The universal Buddha is not such an abstract concept then. It's more a sense of that great unity where, if I'm enlightened and you're enlightened as sentient beings, and then we're also made up of all sort of non-sentient material, then the whole thing is Buddha. Right, that's the universal Buddha. So that's the bowing aspect. Okay, when you bow, you don't have to have that as a thought. It just is, you manifest it as your physical action. And so what I'm getting away from is our dependence on having these sort of really enlightened thoughts. Because thoughts are fickle. What does that mean? They come and go. You can't rely on your thoughts. You just can't. So don't judge yourself by your thoughts. Right? It's a losing battle. Okay? But commit yourself to a practice. Okay? You can discern. Being discerning means you're able to evaluate your practice, but not your thoughts. All right? Are you keeping your commitments, to a practice that will help recondition your mind? Basically, your understanding of who and what you are. What we're trying to do is recondition, in a sense, because our conditioning is until now has been pretty unconscious, unchosen. You haven't really chosen all of the conditioning you've received, have you? Right? If you were to, then most of us would have a much better sense of self. Right? But we're starting to do that, though. We're choosing that we can. There's a plasticity in the mind, meaning that the brain is always, until you die, one of the qualities of a human brain. And that's why even old people can learn a new language, because the brain neurons are still reforming up until death. Yeah, you lose a lot of brain matter, but the cells you still have are, combining and reforming, which means you can recondition your sense of self all along. It's, until you die, it's not too late. The problem is you don't know when you're going to die, so you can't wait, right? So it's an emergency. You don't want to die unhappy, basically. So start now. The last week we ended it saying we're going to talk about making choices. So I have to address that. There, I addressed it. No, but I'll bring up a couple of questions that I had last night that I thought, wow, this is really relevant, and I don't know what to do with them. So one guy came to me after our sitting last night and said to me, he's been coming for a while and he's never asked a question. And he said, well, I'm actually a scientist and I do experiments on mice. Like he's trying to develop drugs to help people. So it's like to help people, He's not sadistic in any way. He's like trying to help people. But to do that, he has to go through hundreds of mice. What does he do? Like how does he reconcile that with the vow not to cause harm and only to help? These great vows that guide our practice. Cease from harm, cultivate good, purify your mind. And I'm killing mice. Okay? So I can, at some point, maybe contribute to medical help in some way, distant future. And I remember a long, long time ago, when I was in Montreal, I met a guy who also was a scientist. And he was, he said like he was working on mice also, or gerbils or something, and it was like really weird what he was doing. I don't know what it was for anyway. He was like a graduate student, and he was going through hundreds of mice brains. I don't know what he was doing with them, but he said to me, I was like, how do you deal with that? And I said, well, I had this sort of faith that at some point in the future, maybe even in 500 years, it'll, contribute to the pool of knowledge that has helped our society. Like, you have a strong faith. You have a very strong faith. He couldn't see any value in it now, right? But he had this faith that maybe in 500 years, the 10,000 mice brains that I went through will contribute to the pool of knowledge, but I don't know what. And this came back to me, I don't know, it's like 25, 30 years later, it came back to me. And this guy is basically asking the same, but he was asking the question. This guy, he knew. But that knowing was a little too confident. It was a little too sure. And so my friend yesterday, he was not knowing. And he said, I'm not expecting an answer. I'm just saying that I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't know what to do with this. What do I do? Should I have in mind that at some point should I quit, or have in mind that I should just say, no, I can't do this? Or, should I bring compassion into it and at some point, I don't know, be compassionate to the mice that I'm killing? And what do you say?
On the one hand, יש את האיסור מפורש בבודהיזם, אם אני לא טועה, לעסוק בעיסוק עשייה נכונה, להימנע לא רוצה לדון את זה בעיקר. זה לא רק רע מה שעושה.
Yeah, so the Buddha talked about the Eightfold Path, right? Which you're referring to, and right livelihood, meaning like having a job that doesn't cause harm. Okay. And traditionally, the Buddha, he identified certain specific ones, like selling drugs or alcohol or weapons or being involved in drug trades or things like that prostitution, that are so obviously causing harm. But here, he was killing in order to hopefully save. So it's very complicated then. It's very confusing, and his intention is right. Like, he's not doing it just because he's getting a good salary. He's doing it, because he really believes that, hopefully medical science has helped a lot. The only thing I could think to say was, well, right now I think you should also apply compassion to yourself. You should apply compassion to your own, your own sense of conflict here. And your own mind that is feeling the struggle. Hold that with care. Hold that with care. And then at some point, it'll be resolved, and who knows what. Keep beginner's mind, but practice compassion. So sometimes we forget that the first object of compassion has to be your own mind. That's the first object of compassion. Then we have to, when you feel like you've made a mistake because you made the wrong choice, and what choice do I make, and the confusion, and what do I do, and what's the right thing, what's the wrong thing, and all of these, the debate we have, and the conflict, and then what eventually happens, obviously, is regret. That's the place. Like when I said, bow to your enemy, at that moment, your enemy is actually this sense of, judgment and fear and all the negative emotions you may be feeling around your own sense of, what do I do? And who am I? And did I make a mistake? To that you bow and you say, thank you for allowing me to practice compassion. Can you take that as your opportunity to bow? And this is why I start with bowing. Because bowing is really important. There's the physical bow, but then there's also the inner bow that you make, and the bow is a compassionate one of saying, yes, I recognize the Buddha even in this confusion. Right? In the heart of the confusion there is clarity, because I can see the confusion. The worst confusion is when you don't even see you're confused. You're just like, sure. Okay? But being able to live with ambiguity is a compassionate thing. Right? Being able to be unsure is a compassionate place. It's soft, it's more vulnerable, it's open. Right? And that's the place where you bow. And when you're feeling like take a step back. That's when you have to breathe. Okay? When you feel sure of yourself, what are you sure of? Are you sure of your practice, or are you sure of your sense of me? And that's what you have to then step back from. And when you're feeling these moments of conflict, inner conflict, outer conflict, they're really the same thing. Okay? Then we stop. And what is stop? Stop's real simple. Okay? And at the beginning I said, keep it simple. And here's the simple instructions. Stop means you stop. Okay? That's the S. The T is you take a breath, or 3 breaths. The O is you observe. And the P is after you've done those 3, you proceed. Meaning you continue. You need to stop more often. Right? We all do. Right? Stopping is a real simple technique to resolve the conflict. That doesn't mean the uncertainty and ambiguity will go away. All right? But the struggle with that ambiguity, the need to resolve it, the need to know, will soften. Like my friend said last night, he's not looking for an answer right now. He just needs to, somehow by telling me, he needed to actually acknowledge. That was his way of observing. His way of observing was actually just telling me about it. And I was like, yeah, I hear you. Sometimes observing is by doing that. You can't, it's too much for you to observe just in yourself. So you need to express it to someone else, and that's the way we observe. Okay, that's great. I think that's also the basis of therapy. That's how you observe it, by speaking it. First, when you feel this conflict, stop. Right? Practice stopping. And that's the practice a lot, is that then you observe. First of all, how do you observe? You take a few mindful breaths. Okay? And that's why I'm also emphasizing that our meditation is not this sort of a half hour. If you set it up as something real special, but Suzuki Urushi says often, it's nothing special. Okay, it's nothing special. As soon as you make it special, you're not going to do it. You'll do it like on Monday nights. And then you're not going to do it tomorrow morning. Don't make it special. Just stop. Right? And stopping can take 30 seconds. It can take half a minute, right? Or less. You're starting to feel a bit agitated, stop. You feel like you really know, you're really confident, stop. Right? Another question I got was, this guy said to me, well, I don't know if the traffic in Tel-Aviv is as bad as in Jerusalem, but that's why I take my bike. And he said, how do I deal with the driving here? Like, I just don't know how to deal with the driving here. Like, such a simple question that all of us experience, and we never resolve it. That's the point. Like, we never resolve that problem because it's always there for us. The problem won't be resolved. But what's our relationship to it? I told him about how there was this Thich Nhat Hanh teaching once where he said, you can recondition your mind. You can actually recondition to change your understanding of the color of lights. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't speak of it this way. He was much more gentle. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh is much more gentle. I'm like, change your mind, okay? And how did he say? He said, you can recondition so that red is green and green is red. What does that mean?
Colorblind.
Sorry?
You're colorblind.
No, that's not what I mean. That might be nice though. But you'll still see that the up one is like bad and the lower one's good. You'll still interpret it that way, right? But what he meant was that when you see a red, you can recondition your mind. Instead of seeing it as like an obstacle stopping me, it actually now is my opportunity to stop and breathe. To stop. That I can stop, take some breaths, observe, and then proceed, you know? So if we see every red as like, hey, meditation time. You know, I didn't get to sit at home, but I get to sit now. I get to sit now. Thank you. You know? And every time you see a red light, you like have this inner bow. Because I've been given another moment free. You know? How wonderful. Like, and then when you see the green, it's like, oh no, I have to now like start moving. Like, why can't the red last longer? See, you can change your mind. When you start to value your practice of stopping, and what does stopping mean? It means observing your life. It means being present. It means embracing your experience and the fullness of being. And you have to stop to do that. And then you start to find these opportunities all over the place that you formerly interpreted as obstacles. But that shift is up to you. Okay, it's not in the world. The world is there. It's our raw ingredients. You take your ingredients, you make the food you want, right? Is it going to be nourishing and tasty, or is it just going to be like, you know, something you don't want? That's up to you. The ingredients are there. The red light is the red light. Okay? And you're stopped, you're stopped. Like you're not moving physically. What are you going to do when you don't move? Our training is to realize the fullness of that opportunity. But we're conditioned to think other people are in our way. Right? Like the world is in my way. To get where? Like where are you trying to go? Well, yeah, you have your plans, right? Your sense of self. But what if your sense of self, what if who you are is this? And this is it. And it's always just this. And your red is wonderful. Your red is wonderful. Okay, it's a great color. Right? Stop. It's always telling you stop. Now when a red police light, that's a different story. But we'll see what happens. No, but honestly, it's up to us. You know, the world is there for you to practice with. If you choose. Okay? But that's the choice we have to make. So when we're talking about making the right choice, the choice behind all choices is the choice to stop. Okay? Is the choice to stop. Even when you're moving, can you stop? Right? Even when you're moving. In the middle of activity, can you find stillness and silence? Meaning, can you breathe, observe, and open to the fullness of your life? That's the stopping. Okay? That's the meditative moment that you can come back to again and again. Can you make that choice? And that's a choice you don't make once a day. It's a choice you make 1,000 times a day. If you're just making it during meditation, okay, it's a good start. But really, you want to keep making that choice over and over and over again. This is related to what the Buddha called the middle way. Okay? And what the Buddha called the middle way, and it actually was the first teaching after the Buddha's enlightenment. When he started what's called, like, at Sarnath, the turning of the wheel of the Dharma. And this is the first turning. So if you look at the image of the wheel, it's like this. The Dharma, the Buddhism is represented originally by this wheel with the center, and then these 8 spokes, these 8 like beams, and each beam is one of the 8-fold path. The wheel is like the cycle of samsara nirvana, like it's the cycle of life. The wheel of life is going round and round and round and round, right? That's why it's a wheel. Okay. But what helps us navigate and be in this wheel and not be thrown, but be centered, is the 8-fold path. And that's what he called the middle way. The middle way, and then it brings us back into the center so we feel centered, right? Because there's a center, they all go to the center. Okay? The samsara is to bring us back into our centered self. And we do that by practicing the 8-fold path. Right? So, when we talk about the middle way, it's not like saying, I don't know, there's 100 centimeters and the middle is 50, right? It's not the middle, like the average, okay? Because let's think of it this way. The Buddha, what did he say in the first teaching? He said, okay, he was talking to monks. He said, oh monks, these are 2 extremes that should be avoided. One is the extreme, the addiction, he said, we have to self-indulgence of sensual pleasures. That we are, obsessed with pleasure. Doesn't mean you always want to be high and have an orgasm. It just means we want to be comfortable. And we have aversion to having any discomfort. And we live our lives like running towards one and away from the other. Okay? And that's one extreme, he said. And so much of our mind and mental energy is pursuing comfort and avoiding discomfort. Okay? A lot of the time. The other extreme, he said, and the other extreme, and he said, oh, then that's really what the low people do. Okay? Which is most of us. And the other extreme is avoiding self-denial and, self-abnegation and being, self-annihilation, he said. Like, the other extreme is denying yourself any comfort. And he went through that, right? He's talking from life experience. So the first 29 years, it was one extreme of having any pleasure and just being comfortable. And the stories of how much comfort he had are kind of funny. That they say, according to legend, and it's all legend, that like his father, kept him in the palace and didn't let any old people in. Because he didn't want to start saying that, hey, what happens? Like you get old. And nobody could be sick either, right? No sickness, no age, and of course no death. Okay. Which is kind of where we're at now. Like everybody wants to be young and we like glorify youth. And have you ever seen a dead person? When's the last time you saw a dead person on the street? Like never. Unless you go to the hospital and go to hospice. I mean, how much death do we experience? And when you do see it, it's like, oh my God, that happens? I saw a dead cat today and I was like, wow. And it's not so much wow that the cat died, but wow, why do I see this like once every 3 months? I mean, why isn't it all the time? What have we done? We're trying to live in the Buddha's palace, Siddhartha's palace. We're trying to recreate Siddhartha's palace, where there's no aging, there's no death, and sickness. Well, take some good drugs, and you'll be able to deny that too. Okay. So that's kind of the one extreme, and then he went to the other extreme, where they say accordingly, like he was only surviving on 1 grain of rice a day. Great. And you see these statues, like there are these famous statues where he looks like this sort of skeleton, and he's meditating. Not so happy. So he said, okay, those are the 2 extremes. He wasn't talking theoretically. He was talking from experience. I went through those, and I can tell you from my experience, trust me, you don't need to go through it. It doesn't get you there. Okay? Won't make you happy. Right? And which means that finding the happy middle doesn't mean it's in the middle of those two extremes. Like, just comfortable enough, but not too comfortable. No, that's not what he was meaning. He said, okay, in the middle way is this. It's the Eightfold Path. Right? Right intention, right understanding, right effort, right, concentration, mindfulness, speech, action, livelihood. Okay? So he talked about right in the Eightfold Path. Like, that was the middle way. He defined the middle way not as the middle between two extremes, but the middle way meaning that you're practicing a right life. And what did right mean? Just this. It meant avoiding harm, increasing the good, and purifying your mind. Okay, that's what right means. If you ever wonder what's the right thing to do, it's actually not so, it's not a trick question. Like, is your thought, speech, and actions, okay, the way we live, the way we express ourselves, thought, speech, and actions, are they going to generate harm in any way, or are they going to be a benefit and create greater lasting and true happiness? That's a real simple question to ask, but it runs to the bone. It goes to the heart of what it means to be alive, right? If it gets more theoretical and complex, then we're probably going to make mistakes. Okay? I was just telling someone before that my first, what I first studied at university in Montreal was philosophy. And the problem was, after a lot of years that I noticed, I studied 4 years, but I saw my professors, most of them were like miserable, and also just like really not nice. Well, you're devoting yourself, and these are people who are teaching like ethics. And you're devoting yourself to this lifelong time. And where has it changed who and what you are, your heart, your mind, your way of being in the world? Why don't you smile more? Like, what happened? So, theory and deep thought is interesting, okay? But it's not going to change the way you actually live. And the practice will, because it's practice. You do it over and over again, even when you don't feel like it or you don't think it. You just do it. You bow, okay? And after you bow, and this is where Tibetan practice has something strong too, is they do these prostrations as a practice, and they couldn't care less what you're thinking. You do 100,000, okay? And then you meet your teacher, and then you do another 100,000, or there's like 1,000,000. Can you imagine doing 1,000,000 prostrations and then checking up with your teacher after you've done 1,000,000 and you counted them, okay? What is your state of mind in number 356,928? And you knew that number, right? And what's the state of mind then? Your commitment is strong, okay? Just to keep doing it. I encourage us to strengthen our commitment to the practice of changing your conditioning, right? Because there's no other way to increase happiness and decrease suffering. This is really, it's what we have to do. It's really what we have to do. And that's why you're here tonight, but that's why tomorrow morning you're going to be doing what you do. You're going to be stopping. Okay? And the stopping does not mean you have to do 1,000,000 prostrations. It just means you have to stop. And you have to ask that question, okay? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Is it really fulfilling, this commitment I have to right living, to following the Eightfold Path, which is avoiding harm and increasing benefit? Is it really contributing to that? And if you can, be honest and sincere, and then take that bow, proceed. Okay, stop. You stop, you breathe, you observe, and then you proceed, you continue. And when you start to feel some confusion and conflict, stop again, and then proceed. And you may find the refuge of stopping 1,000 times a day. Doesn't mean you're going to sit in meditation all that time. It just means you are going to stop and observe and then proceed. And you'll find, okay, that you'll be able to answer the question in the affirmative more and more. But you won't be able to do that unless you stop. And even if the answer is, I don't know, that's affirmative. Okay? Not knowing, one of the great Zen teachers said, not knowing is most intimate. Most intimate. Right? When you can feel unsure, you've touched something really essential. Okay? That not knowing opens your sense of acceptance to the world around you. Why? Because when you know, right? Knowing is, very dualistic. It's like yes and no, like and dislike. Not knowing, very intimate, very intimate. So, as a kind of a little treat, it's not really a treat, is it? I have a poem that it came to mind. It's a poem that I bring for some of my students once. My English students is Robert Frost, the most well-studied poem in high school.
Road Not Taken.
The Road Not Taken. Now, I'd like to read that. Now, you may have studied it in Hebrew. I have the English one. And Robert Frost would not consider himself a Buddhist. But when we brought up the idea of, how do you make choices? How do you make choices and make the right choice? How do you make choices and not be attached to results? This poem came to my mind, and I realized, sometimes when you go back to the poems that you've read for many years, and you read it from the perspective of the Dharma, you see, yeah, okay. When you look around with the eyes of the Dharma, you start to see, okay, there's truth here, and there's truth here, and there's truth here. And I bow to it all. So here I'm going to share it with you. The road not taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one, as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, some people hear that and they think, oh yeah, I'll take the road less traveled. It became a kind of mantra. Road less traveled, road less traveled. But when we read the whole poem, we see that actually they were the same. They were the same, they looked the same. One turned this way, one turned that way. They both were covered by leaves. They were like, he could have taken either one. They were the same. It wasn't that one was less traveled, it's that he hadn't traveled on it. He took that one, okay? That simply was the one he chose, okay? Was the one he chose. And he also knew, he also could predict that in the future he would look back and say, I wonder. I wonder. And I know that I'll never be able to go back there. There's no going back, right? So there's a sense of there's past, present, and future, and it all exists in that moment, and that's just fine, okay? And one road is as good as another, but after you take it, it's not, because then that's your road, right? And as he says at the end, it makes all the difference.
I couldn't take them both.
Yeah. And that's the sigh. That's the sigh. He looks back at it with a sigh. Believe me, it's not like you make a decision and you're like complete. I'm complete with it. Yes, I made the right decision. No, you can accept that ambiguity of also looking back and wondering, maybe I didn't make the right decision. Right? You can't just be really confident about your present and future. You also, the ambiguity is also about your past. Maybe I didn't make the right decision, and I'll look back with a sigh. Okay, that's part of your mind. That's part of what you observe. And then you keep walking. Okay? You keep on the path. There's no going back. But you can accept, on this path, there are the sighs. There are all the sighs. In fact, the whole path is sighs. Right? Or as the Buddha would say, dukkha. Okay? It's one sigh after another. So be it. When you make a choice, it includes all of it. Right? It includes all of it. It includes being confident, being unsure. It includes looking back with regret and looking forward with hope. Right? And all of that happens. And then you take another breath. And you observe it all being reborn. And you take a deep bow. And you proceed. You proceed.